As much as my career was going on this upward trajectory, choreographer for Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, Jessica Simpson, So You Think You Can Dance. I was a judge on the show in the US, different countries around the world. So was my drinking. You know, when we hit the pandemic, my addiction just exploded. I was a shell of myself. My kids looking at me almost in fear. I got to do something about this, if not for myself, for them. For them.
What's going on, everybody? That was tonight's guest, Dan Karaty. My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and this is Hard Knocks Talks, coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty Number 6 territory, and the traditional land of the Métis people. Let's bring in Dan. What's up, Dan?
Not much, man. How's it going?
It's going very well. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling great. Yeah, New Year. Had some fun with the kids over the holidays, and had a good New Year's Eve last night, and just ready to hit the ground running this year.
Awesome. Yeah. It was a challenge to get you in the pre-interview there. You're off hanging out with the kids, and part of me was frustrated, but part of me really had a lot of respect for your ability to just like unplug and be like, nope, kids. So like that was good, and I'm glad that it all worked out. Like it all worked out in plenty of time. So like we're winning, man.
Yeah, sorry for making you chase me a little bit there.
No.
But,
it's part of the job description. So, is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in tonight?
Geez, I don't know. I'm loving sitting here on the 1st of January. I can't think of a better way to start my year than sharing my story, hopefully getting some hard questions, maybe digging up some stuff I haven't thought about in a little while, and, maybe helping some other people relate and help them along the way too. So that's why I jumped at this date. When you offered this date to me and said the 1st, I said, yeah, I mean, what better way to start the year?
Awesome. Well, with that, let's jump in.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
All right. Before we jump in, I'd just like to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's live production is sponsored in part by Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mum Stop the Harm, and Prairie Sky Recovery Centre in Leipzig, Saskatchewan. All right, Dan, where do we begin? So where did this all get started for you? Being a person in recovery, coming up on 2 years, was this a lifelong journey for you? Like, was there drinking growing up at home?
I grew up in a very loving home, 2 wonderful parents, 4 older brothers and sisters, close-knit family, happy. And I can count on one hand how many times I saw my parents actually take a drink. They didn't drink. Alcohol really didn't play a part in my life until I saw my older brothers coming home drunk once in a while when they were in high school. And then when I got to high school, from watching them and their friends a bit, and, just kind of some other people in town, it just kind of felt like it was the thing to do. It was like sort of like a rite of passage. You get to high school and you drink on the weekends.
So what was your first thoughts with that when you first saw your brothers coming home loaded? Like, were you like, that looks amazing, or were you like, why are they acting so stupid?
More like, why are they acting so stupid? And years later, my dad reminded me that I said, "I'll never do that, Dad. I'll never do that." Because I saw how mad and upset my parents would get. And so I had to point out that I can see that that's wrong, and I won't do it. But inevitably, I did it. And not only did I do it, from freshman year, from the very first time I drank, I was blackout. It's the only way I knew how. There was no easing into it.
Last man standing.
That's it, always. And it was, I drank until I either blacked out or we ran out of booze, and that was it. And that's how I that's how I operated all the way through high school. But
Mm-hmm.
being the youngest of 5 kids in the family, my parents got to me and kind of said, listen, if you handle your responsibilities, you can more or less do whatever you want. And I was a really good student, all A's and B's. I was the captain of my soccer team, and my parents owned a dance studio, and I danced at their studio. And as long as I handled those responsibilities, I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. And I took full advantage of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I went out every Friday and Saturday night for years. And then once I got into junior year, you could tack on sometimes Thursday nights and Sunday nights onto that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had no consequences. My mom caught me plenty of times drunk and throwing up and, just being ridiculous. And I
Were they
did not get in
concerned?
trouble because
Like, so were they concerned about like pushing you further into it? You think, like, maybe you can't speak for your parents, or did they just not have any concern about it all?
no concern at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was just never even a question other than, handle your responsibilities. And I did that,
Drink like a
you
man.
know, yeah. And I did it to the nth degree. I did everything to the nth degree, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
with the great grades and the soccer and but the
Mm-hmm.
drinking was the same way. And then I went to college, and I lived in New York City and, went to NYU, and it didn't change. And I graduated with a journalism degree. But while I was in school, I started dancing professionally as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I took a semester off and I was dancing on Broadway. And then my senior year, I started doing award shows for Britney Spears and was dancing on the MTV Awards and things like that. And so it was like no one ever questioned my behavior or my drinking because look at everything I was doing. Everything
Mm-hmm.
was good. Um, and I was in great shape and I was dancing 6 days a week. And, there was no reason to question me. So
So
when
you
when I graduated college, I moved to LA and I took my drinking show with me to LA.
so
I grew up
you
in New Jersey and
you
then
had
lived
all
in New York
these
and then LA.
sorry you had all these people around you, and you never had any family or any friends ever once be like, man, you need to like kick it back a notch.
Never. I surrounded myself with friends that were just like me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
I found the party kids, and those were the kids I hung out with. And my brothers and to an extent my sisters partied as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of seemed it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
We thought it was normal. And who I surrounded myself with, like I said, the friends, I made it seem normal. And the friends, that I left behind in New York and New Jersey, I found new ones out in LA that were exactly the same. I
Mm-hmm.
migrated towards those kids who blacked out with me.
Mm-hmm.
But my career just took off, and from dancing in music videos and going on concert tours, within a year I was choreographing, and now I'm working for Britney Spears as a choreographer, not just a dancer. And then I was working for NSYNC and doing all this stuff and getting to travel the world, and I'm making a ton of money as a 23, 24-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
So no one did question me. And the few times that I would have those like 3 or 4 day benders,
Yeah.
where I'd wake up and look at myself in the mirror and be like, whoa, what happened? I would explain it all away to myself by just saying, yeah, well, I mean, life is good. Look how good you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you deserve to party. That's how I looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, it wasn't slowing me down from anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and then, my career jumped another notch when I was in my late 20s. And So You Think You Can Dance, the television show came around, and
Mm-hmm.
I got hired as a choreographer and as a judge on the show. And now all of a sudden I'm on TV once or twice a week on a show being watched by 10 million people. I'm getting recognized on the street. I got a fan club, like all this stuff. And it was like, I mean, it went to my head, and I thought I was king of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And again, now I have more money, more ability to travel. I actually get to work less days because of being on television and stuff and not choreographing as much. So I'm partying even more now,
Mm-hmm.
and going to the expensive clubs and sitting
I
at the
was
pricey
I
tables.
was just gonna go there. I've been waiting for a spot to slide that in there. So you must have been surrounded with like the I don't know what else to call it, like the cream of the crop, like some big money and some big partying. Did you ever look around and be like, man, I'm at least I'm not as bad as that guy, like was there ever any of that?
Absolutely. I was the king of comparing myself to other people and
Uh-huh.
seeing people who were a mess and thinking, yeah, well, I'm not like them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I have more money. I have this or I have that. I have it all together.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I looked at it. And I was a mess. I was the worst guy in the room. I was embarrassing myself half the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see it that way. My entitlement complex was just off the charts. And I thought I deserved to be in every room and I deserved to party as hard as I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And no one could tell me different,
Mm-hmm. Do you ever
and
So even at this point, did you have anybody like saying like, man, you really like made a mess last night? Like none of that?
not really. There were times where somebody was like, dude, you were hammered last night. Like, what the fuck were you doing?
Uh-huh.
And I would laugh it off and I would make a joke out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And no one pressed me on it because I think if anyone did press me on it, I would have just pushed them out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just proceeded with this behavior. It didn't change until I met my wife when I was 29, almost 30 years old. And from the time we were together for about 3 months or so dating, she started to question me a little bit and
Was she
and
a heavy
started
drinker?
to she was not. She loved to go out, but she was the type to have two drinks
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. So she would just watch me and just, would basically carry me home. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next day would be like, what is that?
Did
What are
she
you
think
doing?
did you think she was weird for that? Like were you like, why you only
I
drink two?
thought
Who even does
she
that?
I just said to her, I was like, you're not used to this environment. This is how it is here.
Yeah.
This is what we do at these clubs and these events. And I have my Giants sweatshirt on. I would take her to sporting events, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and, and I would get wasted at the sporting event. And I'd be like, that's what you do, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like, and I would explain it away. But again, I would find a way to manipulate the situation and tell her, point out to her how good I'm doing. Oh, I'm about to fly to Australia and do So You Think You Can Dance in Australia for 3 weeks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't tell me I have a problem. They're paying me this much money and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I would convince her because I was very convincing and very manipulative. I always convinced her that I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and ultimately, when she would truly challenge me, I would tell her that I can get this under control whenever I want. And so to prove that to her a couple times after, a bad bender and she would be really mad and threaten to break up with me,
Mm-hmm.
I would quit. Right. And the best one was I quit for 8 months.
On a
No,
resentment.
7 months. And I trained for the New York City Marathon
Mm-hmm.
and I ran the marathon and basically was like, see, like, and and thought that I was proving something by doing that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I had fixed nothing up here in my head,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had just traded addictions. I gave up drinking. I started running. The moment I was done running and finished the marathon, I started drinking a week later. And within 3 weeks, I was drinking just as much as I was before I quit.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't fixed a thing other than to think that I proved her, I showed her. That's how I looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would convince her that, you know, why shouldn't I do this right now? I'm young, making a lot of money, and we don't have any responsibility yet.
Mm-hmm.
It'll change when we get married. And
Mm.
I promised her that it would change when we got married.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Did you
we
believe it?
got married. Sorry?
Did you believe it? Did you believe it would change when you got married?
You know, I truly believed that I had control over it.
Mm-hmm.
I because I had such willpower in every other part of my life. I ate a perfect diet.
Mm-hmm.
I worked out 6 days a week. I was dancing more days than I wasn't dancing. I was disciplined in every other aspect of my life. So I truly thought the drinking was just, I just drink because I can, because it's fun and I like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I need to stop, I will. Um, and then we got married, and shortly after, my wife got pregnant, and without telling her, I started thinking I should maybe start drinking a little bit less, right?
Oh.
And I could not.
Did you try
I
to go
couldn't.
underground with it? Like, when you got married, did you like start like sort of sneaking around a little bit to like drink?
I didn't do that until she was in the late months of her first pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the late months of her first pregnancy, because she needed obviously a lot of help. We had just moved into a new house,
Yeah.
and I had to do a lot of the work, like getting the house ready for our first child to come. And so I would drink what would be a normal amount for me, which was not a normal amount, but
Mm-hmm.
for me it would be. And then when she would go to sleep, then I would drink some more. And that's when I was first hiding it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Is that when you first
and
started to, is that when you first started to think that maybe you're drinking too much or that maybe this was a problem? Or were you at that time like, oh, good, she's in bed, I can drink now?
oh, good, she's in bed. I can drink now.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, as I just said, like we had just bought a beautiful new home, and my career just kept going. Right, despite everything I was doing to destroy my career, it just kept going up, kept getting
Mm-hmm.
better. And I was traveling all over the world, a lot to Europe, and I was not only doing So You Think You Can Dance, I was doing Got Talent and other talent shows. I was shooting like 3 shows a year over in Amsterdam and Belgium and the UK, and I there was like too much work. I didn't have enough hours in the day for how
Wow.
much I was working, and so I was making more money, and I was like, so I started to recognize that I was drinking too much. I started to think, but I would say,
Oh.
yeah, but you know what? It's not stopping you.
Did you ever get into the press? Like, did any of your escapades ever make it into the news?
No. So here's the one saving grace I had is
Mm-hmm.
I like to drink by myself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was not like the guy who loved to hit the clubs. Like once I got to my late 20s and stuff, I was bored of going to the clubs and the bars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather sit on my couch and watch football or something and drink like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was much more fun for me. So, would I go out and have a few drinks with friends? Yes. But did I really turn it on? No, not until I got home. Not
Hmm.
until I was by myself.
Not until
That's
the
where I
wife
would
was in
turn it
bed.
on. Yeah. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's how I hit it. Nobody knew. The only one that ever knew was my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the drinking just kept going like this until we had our first baby, um, and that's when it started to become like kind of a point of contention with my wife, because I had made these promises about when we get married, when you get pregnant. Okay, well, definitely when we have kids, then I'll cut back.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if anything, I was drinking more.
Yeah.
Um, Once my daughter was around, I was drinking even more. And then we had our second child, and drinking even more, and I couldn't stop. Um, but I was traveling more now for work, right? So I was overseas probably 3 months out of the year. Um, and so I'm on my own in hotel rooms, drinking myself to sleep every night.
Still thinking it's
And
normal. Like tell
no,
us so tell us about the day that you came to the realization that maybe there's a problem here. Like, was that a tough realization to make? Like, cuz I know for me, like finding that level of acceptance that okay, this isn't going to fix itself and it's becoming problematic. Like that was tough. Was that tough for you?
so here's where it became tough. My son, when he was 9 months old, so he's our second child. When he was 9 months old, he out of nowhere got really sick.
Mm.
And we took him to the hospital. The doctor said, you got to get him to the hospital immediately. And we took him to the hospital, and they could not figure out what was wrong with him. And what we thought was just going to be an emergency room visit, get his fever down, and we'll bring him home, turned into like a 3-week stay at the hospital. And them unable to figure out what was happening to him. And, ultimately as a parent, you you just want the answer. You want the assurance that he's going to
Gonna
be
be
okay,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
Once we were about 4 hours in, and you're watching the doctors scramble all over the place, and you could tell they're a little panicked, right? We asked, okay, listen, we can do this, we can do that. We'll check into the hospital, we'll stay. You can run the test you want to run, but he's 9 months old. He's going to be okay, right? They wouldn't answer the question. And so it took them a few weeks to figure it out. We went through the whole gambit of it could be this, it could be that, it could be this blood disorder, it could be leukemia, it could be anything under the sun they were trying to figure out. But while we were there, only one parent was allowed to stay with him each night. And I convinced my wife every night that it was more important for her to stay with him and for me to go home. Because I told her, he he loves to lay on you. He loves to be with you. And I convinced her of that
You think she bought it?
because I couldn't bear the thought of staying in the hospital all night and not having a drink. I chose, my son could possibly have not made it through the night, and I chose to go home every night so that I could drink. And that wasn't that was the moment where I said to myself, what is wrong with you? What is going on? Unfortunately, it didn't stop anything. That
Yeah.
wasn't the end of it.
Right.
But that was the first time I remember sitting in bed, my 2-year-old daughter sleeping next to me, and me sitting there drinking wine, watching TV at whatever time it was, and just kind of staring off, wondering like, what is happening? Your son's in the hospital. They don't know what's wrong with him. Your wife's there, basically crying 24/7, terrified. You're supposed to be here taking care of your 2-year-old, and all you're doing is getting bombed. Like imagine if the hospital called and I had to rush over there.
Yeah.
And I thought of all of those things. All of those things were important to me at that moment, but it didn't stop me. It didn't stop me from drinking. And that was like when that's when it smacked me in the face that I had a problem.
Did you try to drink your way out of that?
Of course I did. It was like the only way to deal with it was just to drink
Drink
more,
more. Yeah.
And I'll sidetrack here a little bit. And as it turned out, my brother is open about his sobriety. My brother's been sober for 8 years now. Through all of this time, I watched my brother battle with the disease. and him reaching out to me for help all the time because he thought I had my shit together, and I would quote unquote coach him, and tell him what he needed to do, and meanwhile I was going home every night and drinking. Um, and as my brother went through his battle, I found out that alcoholism runs in my family, that my grandfather was an alcoholic, that I had an aunt years earlier that died from alcoholism, that I had a great grandparent who was an alcoholic. So it turns out that addiction ran pretty hard through my family. So, I mean, it should have been so obvious to me, but it wasn't, and my son got out of the hospital and it turns out he was okay. It was an autoimmune disorder that, yes, we have to really be diligent about how we take care of him and sterilize the house and do all this stuff, but basically he's going to be okay. And so it was like everything's back to normal, and I kept going, and it never changed um, until the pandemic hit, right? So I had found this groove leading up to the pandemic, um, where I had admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic, um, and I was different. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm different. I figured this shit out.
I got
And
this.
yeah, and I am highly functioning. I'm still traveling. I'm still doing all my shows. I'm still making money. I'm raising two great kids with my wife. Um, I was on the
I,
cover of Men's Health magazine in Europe. Um,
were you drunk?
like, imagine
Were
the
you
fucking
were you nope.
hypocrisy.
Were you drunk?
I
Or at
was
least hungover?
drinking when I did. I was drinking when I did the interview. When I
Okay.
did the interview, because it was by phone, I was drinking.
Mm.
They were asking me about my healthy lifestyle and everything, and I was talking about everything is in mediation and everything, and like the hypocrisy is off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I knew it, but I thought I was fooling. I was fooling everybody except my wife, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, I couldn't travel anymore. And like everybody, everything got taken away, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't working anymore. I wasn't traveling. I wasn't on TV. I was none of these things. I was these walls and this whole facade that I had built up around myself
Gone.
was stripped down. And now I'm just a dad and a husband sitting at home. And
And that wasn't
I didn't know what
significant
to
to
do with
you.
myself.
That wasn't significant to you at that time. I mean, you say like being a dad and being a husband, like these are great things to be, right?
So I thought I was a great dad.
Mm.
And I also thought I was a great husband. Now, as a husband, my wife had gotten into this habit where she would sit me down probably 3 times each year and have this like real, like pour out her heart talk with me and tell me that I know you think everything is okay, but it's not. You're completely unavailable to me. And I thought she was nuts. I thought she was crazy. And I was like, man, nothing can make this woman happy.
Mm.
That's like how I looked at it, because look at everything I'm giving you. And, we have two great kids in this beautiful house, and you drive a nice car. And what more do you want from me? She wanted
Mm.
a partner. She wanted someone to talk to her, but I didn't realize that. And I thought it was her. I didn't think it was me. And I pretended like I was super dad because I took my kids everywhere, right? I took my kids to every sporting event. I took my kids to the best amusement parks. I took them on great vacations. I always talk about my son fishing. My son lives for fishing from the time he was 5 years old. And
Mm.
I took him fishing whenever he wanted to go. And I made sure I took a picture and I made sure I put it on Instagram so that everybody could see what a great
Mm-hmm.
dad I was. And I would set him up on the dock, and then I would go to the other end of the dock and I would drink beers. That was super dad, you know?
Mm. Yeah.
So, to answer that question, were those things not important to me or big? I thought I was doing the right thing for them, for all of them. I was wholly unaware of how unavailable and not present that I was. Um, so as the pandemic rolled on and all of that got stripped away from me, I became a mess. I was anxiety riddled. Um, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was like being forced to look at myself as just right, as just a dad and
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
husband, and I couldn't do it. And so my drinking just it took off. I went from being a nighttime drinker, like starting at 5 o'clock and
Mm-hmm.
drinking until I went to bed, which I thought was totally normal. Um, and whenever I could convince someone to go to lunch with me, I would have a few drinks at lunch if I could find somebody to go to lunch with me. Now, during the pandemic, I mean, I started every day at lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the pandemic rolled on, I started earlier and earlier until I was drinking from the moment I woke up.
Did that still feel like kind of normal to you? Like you're like, oh, I got nothing to do anyways. I might as well have a drink. Or were you like, I know I'm escaping right now?
So when I started drinking heavier starting at noon, I thought, why shouldn't I be doing this right now? There's nothing to do. There's no work. It's the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's doing this. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
would say.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's doing this. Because I would see on social media all these posts about people, stuck at home. What else do we do? We drink, da da da. I was like, oh yeah, see, I'm not the only one. That's like how I would justify it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started drinking earlier, when I started drinking before my coffee, I knew I was doomed. Right? I was like, dude, there's no way back from this.
What was your wife
Um,
saying at the time? Like when you started drinking earlier and earlier and earlier? And how about the kids? Like how
so
old are the kids at this time?
the kids were 9 and 7, 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
The kids didn't notice at first, because despite the drinking and everything, I was still going outside with them. I was still doing everything I
Could.
could.
Yeah.
My wife was disgusted with me. She didn't know what to do, and she just kept saying, like, babe, like, what are you doing? You got to cut back and again manipulate and explain. And here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to cut back.
I mean, do you think that she was buying it at this point?
No, I think she was desperately hoping at this point, but I don't think
Yeah.
she was buying it because she saw me trying every bullshit trick in the book, um, and I couldn't do it. And we got to the point where I went from being, the first one up in the house and doing 2 hours of work and doing all this kind of stuff before anybody else woke up to now I was the last one getting out of bed and I wasn't working out anymore. And if I was doing something with the kids, it's because they were dragging me out of the house. Um, and I was laying in bed one morning, and my daughter, who was 9 at the time, walked in and came around to the side of the bed. And, I'm okay with saying, like, I was like my daughter's hero leading up to this. We're very similar personalities, and she and I were go, go, go together all the time. And I was like her, played with her 24/7. And she walked in and stopped and looked at me and looked scared, and asked me what was wrong and said that I didn't look good. And, she went in. I found out later she went in to where my wife was. My wife was staying in the guest room at this point because she couldn't stand the smell or the sight of me. And my daughter thought I was dying, and she told my wife that. It made my 9-year-old think that I was dying. And that morning, I dragged my sorry ass into that guest room where my wife was staying, and I said, I need help. I can't do it. Like I was out of ideas. I was out of everything I thought I could do to fix it, everything I thought I could do to quit. I was out of ideas, and I promised, I know I promised myself that I would quit. I promised my wife multiple times, and when we got married and when she got pregnant and all of that. But I was not going to do that to my kids. I was not going to make them live with a dad like that. And the way she looked at me that morning, my daughter, I couldn't stand the thought of that. And I said that to my wife, and I think part of her hated me at that point, but I think the relief as well. And I think she was happy to get me out of the house. And about 40 hours later or so, I was in rehab.
So the gig was up even for you. Like, were you still trying to manipulate in some way at this point? Like, even manipulate yourself at this point? Or were you just, this is done now, I need to make a better decision?
Yeah, so I meant it when I went in there and told her, that's it, right? I'm done.
Mm.
But I went back and laid down in bed, and a half hour later, I started, I can fix this. I can fix this,
Back drinking again?
And what?
Did you start drinking again? That
So
day?
I went into the guest room again and tried to tell my wife, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And she was like, no way. Like, you got to go, all this. And I was like, okay, okay. And she said, babe, you might be leaving tonight or tomorrow morning, whatever. This could be your last day here for a long time. Can you just stay sober? Can you just be here with us? And I said, of course, I will. And I thought I meant it when I said it. And a half hour later, I was sitting in front of the liquor store, waiting for it to open to go in and buy a bottle. And I drank and passed out by 5 o'clock that afternoon.
Got a comment coming in here from Tyler. Tyler, thanks for the comment. Tyler says, my son's mom slept on the sofa upstairs for over a year because she couldn't handle the smell or the sight of me dying.
Yeah, my wife would go on work trips sometimes, and she would come home and walk into our bedroom and just be like, what have you been doing in here? Because the whole room just reeked of alcohol. And she would just say, like, look at yourself, in the mirror, and I didn't even know how much I changed until 6 months later. She showed me a picture on her phone, like 6 months after being clean. She showed me a picture on her phone of what I looked like before I went to rehab. Holy shit. I mean, I was a different person, completely different person.
Yeah. So tell us about rehab, about treatment. Did you walk in there like thinking like, I'm going to be the best at recovery and you're going to change everyone's lives in there? You did, didn't you? You did.
They're lucky to have me.
Yeah, goddamn right.
I went there kind of, tail between my legs. My wife like shoved me out of the car, couldn't wait to get rid of me. The humiliation of the strip search and all of that. God, I needed that. I didn't like it, but I needed it. It was such a slap in my face, and a wake up call of like, you need to be here. If they were strip searching you, clearly there's an issue. Um,
They don't just do that to anybody.
they don't do that to just anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I needed that. And I was overwhelmed with guilt and shame for a day and a half or so. Guilt over leaving my kids. I felt like I was, you know, abandoning them, even though this
Mm-hmm.
was the best thing I could have done for them. But I felt like I was abandoning them, and the shame of just like, holy crap, I'm in rehab. After that first day and a half or 2 days, whatever it was, the next 29, 30 days were the best days I had lived in years. I hadn't been that happy,
The laughing,
that
man, the belly laughing, like,
laughing.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, belly laughing
Mm-hmm.
and connecting to people. I mean, I felt like I had found my people, because I'm talking to everyone. I wouldn't shut up,
Mm-hmm.
because it was like I felt like they understood me. I felt like I didn't have to hide anymore, and like just this huge weight was gone. I didn't have to try to figure out where my next drink was coming from. I didn't have to figure out how to lie, who I had to lie to, what lie did I tell, any of that. I could
You
just
didn't
tell
lie?
everybody.
You didn't lie in treatment?
No, I didn't lie in treatment. I spilled it.
I
And I,
tried. I did. I tried. And then they're like, no, Dan, no.
well, part of, where I was lying to myself, like I said, those
That's,
first two
yeah.
days, I was lying to myself because I was looking around and I was seeing these guys. I was only an alcoholic,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing these guys coming in who were heroin addicts and things like that, and I was saying, I'm not him. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not that guy. I'm not as bad as him. And then when I sat in the meeting and I heard that guy share his story, I said, holy shit, I'm exactly like him. I think the exact same way. We have a different jug of choice, but we're the same person,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized really quick that I had the same problem as everybody else that was in there. And that was, it was like, it relieved me
Yeah.
of everything that I had been holding inside, that I had been trying to hide, and just made me feel like free.
So it wasn't a
I
wave
was
of it wasn't a wave of guilt that came over you when you realized the state you were in. It was a state of relief.
relief.
Ain't that like that's
Relief.
crazy, isn't it?
It was, but it was like being able to say it out loud and to say it to someone else and not feel like I was being judged,
Mm-hmm.
um, and not have to just keep it to myself anymore. Um, and what I found out really quick was that I've been surrounded by people who would have treated me that way forever. I just never gave them a chance because I didn't open up to anyone. I didn't share it with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it needed to start in rehab with these guys because I just felt safe in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was overwhelmed by the brotherhood, and the way everyone was there for each other and trying to take care of each other and help each other. It was so weird to me. And the way they were all laughing, like that second day coming down to like my first meeting after I got out of detox, because I was only in detox for 2 days, and hearing these guys talk and laugh. And I was like, what is everybody laughing about? Like, because I thought my life was over, right? It's like
Yeah.
I had gone to rehab. I had actually physically gone to rehab for my kids. I was going to do this for my kids. My life, as I
Mm-hmm.
know it, is over. I will never have fun again. I will never smile again, but I'll get sober for my children. That's what I was thinking.
Donna's over here chuckling away.
um,
Interestingly enough, I think a lot of women, especially with unplanned pregnancies, think that, it's like, oh, fuck, there goes my life.
Mm.
yeah, it completely, like, there it goes, and I'm no longer living for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's, all of the good times are past. But it's
And
like this is the cross I bear. I'm going to do this for my kids,
isn't it
you know?
interesting? Isn't it interesting how you say I'm no longer living for me, but it's in not living for you that you found freedom. You know, and you
Hello.
go into the program. You're a 12-stepper. You said I could out you on that before the show. And in that
Yeah.
12-step program, they talk about service. They talk about getting outside your head. And it's that one thing that we hang on to so hard. Oh, my life is over. I can't do what I want anymore. And when you put it down, you can do everything you want.
I couldn't understand why these guys in there were helping me,
Mm-hmm.
why they were, putting their arm around me and telling me it was going to be okay and being nice to me and sharing their stories with me and asking me to share. I was like, what is wrong with these people? Like, I couldn't, I
What's in
couldn't
it for
wrap
them?
my head around it, but I realized it was all about helping each other. And like you said, and the service, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
that made no sense to me at first, but it very quickly becomes obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, I remember like my first phone call with my wife kind of annoyed her because I think she heard how happy I was. And she was like, understandably, I think she was hoping I went away and felt a little bit of the torture that she had been
Yeah,
feeling for so many years,
fair
you
enough.
know? Fair enough. And I think instead she got this guy on the phone. I was like, this is fantastic. I wish I came here years ago,
Why didn't you tell me to do this earlier?
um, but I realized really quick in there, I realized I wasn't foolish enough because I was listening to these guys who were in there for second, third, fourth times
Mm,
and why they were there. So I wasn't foolish to think this is going to be easy. But I was realizing for the first time, being clear headed, I realized what I could be as a person and as a dad, and like everything that I had been missing, and when I got to do those weekly phone calls with my kids on FaceTime and actually talk to them and look in their eyes and listen to what they had to say, it started to click in my head of like how much better everything could be if I could figure this thing out. Um, so those 30 days went by in a heartbeat.
mm. Sorry if
Yeah.
I'm like looking off to the side here. My son came into the studio here, and he's here. Put your face on there.
What's up, buddy?
So he does that sometimes. So,
That's all good.
anyways, yeah, what a great time to come in too, really. So,
Yeah.
okay, so the light came on, amazing. Tell us about what it was like leaving treatment. Was it scary to leave, or were you like, start the engine, let's go?
So I was nervous to leave because of all these guys I had just mentioned who could not impress upon me enough the need to keep doing the work. They were there for the third, fourth, fifth time, and they were like, dude, there's no reason you can't be a first time winner if you stick to the program.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got out of there so like wound up of I got to do this right, and
Mm-hmm.
so I went out of there and basically went running to a meeting, and I started my outpatient treatment the next day, and I was over the moon to be home with my wife and my kids, obviously. Um, but I also knew that my sobriety had to come first. And I am unbelievably fortunate. Um, Not only that, my wife stuck by me, um, it stayed with me and was there when I came home because God knows when I got out of the car to go into rehab, I didn't think she was going to be there when I got back.
Mm-hmm.
So not only was that incredible, but she was fully supportive and understanding of your sobriety comes first. Your meetings, your IOP, the schedule you need to keep to stay sober is more important than anything with us. And so I was able to make that my priority every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to build the schedule that I needed to build from the moment I got out to stay on track.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to say that made things easy. It didn't make things easy, but it made everything manageable.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't being pulled in two different directions and trying to do right by my family, but trying to do right by my sobriety. And
Program.
it wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
She made it as easy as she could for me.
So you,
Just like she has for everything in my life.
so when you and your wife met, you were already in it. You were already problematic in your drinking. What has it been like since you've entered recovery, since you've been abstinent, since you've been healing? Is it different now? Like, are you a different person? Does she say, like, who are you some days? Because she
She
doesn't
said she has
know.
to relearn.
Yeah.
She has to relearn who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was an alcoholic when we met. Um, so for the 16 years that we were together before I got sober,
That's what she
that's the
knew.
guy she knew. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of healing that needs to happen because on her end, because she has realized that I had been lying to her from day one
Mm-hmm.
about big things and little things. Um, but at the same time, she loves the guy that I am now. It just surprises her sometimes, you know, how how unstressed I am, how there's no such thing as a big problem.
mm.
Um,
I
I
haven't
think
even
it
got, I'm almost
annoys
6 years in and I'm not even there yet, man. You got one up on me.
it annoys her a little bit because like no matter what comes up, I'm like, it's not a
Yeah.
big deal. We'll figure it out. Like I'm very much a we'll figure it out where I was high strung, overstressed about anything. You know, it was like it didn't matter what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now I'm not about anything. You know, it's like I was the guy freaking out in traffic like so many people do. You know, it's like road rage to the nth degree. And now just driving along, sit in traffic, listen to music, happy as can be, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anything around the house, anything with work, anything. And that changes things with her. You know, I think it's strange for her, for a guy who said that he was antisocial his whole life and convinced her that I was antisocial. Um, you know, now I'll talk to the waiter at the restaurant for a half hour if he'll talk to me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'll talk to anybody. You know, and that's weird for her. And I think it's weird for her that I'll get on the phone with a stranger who needs help and talk to them for as long as they need
Mm-hmm.
on the phone. And I think she kind of looks at that a little bit of resentment because she's like, you would never talk to me like that before, you know? And I'll take as much time as it needs for that person.
So,
But she knows the way I open up to her and try to talk about us now
mm-hmm.
in a way. Like everything before was how fast can I get out of this conversation?
Yeah.
Right. And now it's I'll sit in that conversation for as long as it takes.
How has it changed for you? Like, how is the relationship? Because clearly, if you're on one for 16 years, you clearly, maybe I'm wrong, but you probably didn't really get to know her either when you were lost in that. So, how has that been for you getting to know your wife in sobriety?
It's about appreciating her, right? It's like my wife, I always knew that I hit a home run when I couldn't believe I got her to date me,
Mm-hmm.
marry me, have kids with me. Every step of the way was a win. But I didn't fully appreciate how great she was for me and everything she does for me and for us and for our kids, you know, the mom she is. I just didn't appreciate it. I mentioned this earlier. Like, I would act like she was crazy when she would question me about things and be like, God, nothing will make her happy, you know? And it's like, I realized I was going so far with trying to make her happy. And all she wanted was for me to sit down and have a conversation with her, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, so realizing how simple things can be and how even more connected we could be, how much fun we can have together without doing anything. Um, Everything we should have been all along, we're becoming now.
So where did the rubber? And we're running tight on time here, but I want to touch a little bit on the steps here, and just like what really hit for you? Like where did the rubber meet the road for you in your program, and where did you struggle the most? Like was there a pinnacle moment? Like did you get to a certain step and you're like, that's it, there it is, and then you were off to the races?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. This might be fairly common. I'm not sure. I know for me, getting into step 4 and at first being able to pinpoint pinpoint the people that I had resentments towards, that I thought I had resentments towards. It was like when I first sat down to do that step, I thought, I don't resent anybody. It's like, and I have great relationships with everybody, but when I really dug in, I realized all these small resentments I held towards people who are really close to me as well. And it surprised me what I was carrying around. But then what smacked me in the face more than anything was recognizing 99% of it was my fault. Um,
Mm.
and recognizing my role in it, uh, in the way I treated people, the way I avoided confrontation. Um, that was the biggest thing. I
Mm-hmm.
spent my whole life avoiding confrontation. Um, and rather than face either things that I did wrong or face people who I think wronged me, I found my way out of it and ran in the other direction and
Mm-hmm.
just carried that stuff with me. And most of it was stupid shit, that
Mm-hmm.
could have been handled if I, didn't run from everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was probably like the biggest, hardest hitting moment of a realization, and recognizing all these people who I thought sucked, realizing what I did to contribute to the downfall of whatever that relationship was. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll admit too, my mistreatment of girlfriends in my life who I thought I treated like queens. And I realized how, you know, same thing, unavailable and unfair I was in those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Cool, man. Well, I think we'll cap it off there, but tell us a little bit about your social media presence. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? You have a podcast. Where can they find it?
Yeah, my podcast is my favorite thing that I do now, getting to have conversations like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's called Dan Karaty, if I'm being honest. You can find it on YouTube or Spotify, Apple, all of them, where I just have, conversations with people about obstacles they faced in their life and, how they've overcome them. Loving that. And I'm on all the different social medias, TikTok, Instagram. It's just my name, Dan Karaty. And I love getting on there and sharing my truth after being dishonest for so many years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to be honest and not faking anything and just really connecting with people is awesome. So don't hold back. Send me messages. I love that.
Cool. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with tonight?
I always leave this. It's the simplest thing in the world. Um, the biggest, scariest thing for me when I started the journey was just how overwhelming the thought of, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna have fun again. I'm never gonna drink again. And the whole one day at a time mantra, as simple as it is, man, it made all the difference in the world for me to get started and not get overwhelmed and just handle what was right in front of me, and made every day easier. So
Awesome.
do that.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks so much for stopping by tonight, sharing your experience and your strength and your hope. We really appreciate you sharing that with our community tonight, and we'll let you go. Take care, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, if you are getting something out of what we're doing here, you can find all our audios on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or live and interactive right here on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch TV. Thanks for watching. Take care. We will see you next time on Hard Knocks Talks.